All right. Yeah, so the infix that we saw from last class was an example from Tagalog, which is a language spoken in Philippines. But, you know, English actually does infixation to a limit. Like it does, we don't have a lot of infixes in the language, but can anybody think of an infixation in English?
The one that I thought of, it's not necessarily, I don't think it's like in a dictionary or proper English, but more used casually. If someone says like, oh, abso-freaking-lutely, or something like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Abso-freaking-lutely is a classic example of an affixation, which is an infix in English. So, oh, did I just delete that entire slide? There. Did not mean to do that. Abso-freaking-lutely, right? And I talk about this a lot more in 315, that the freaking can only be attached to a certain part of absolutely, right? You cannot say ab freaking solutely, or you cannot say absolute freaking tily, right? That just doesn't work. So this is a regular process of English. There is a, you know, you can write a rule for this, and you know, there are other kinds of infixes very similar to this, and we will not you know, I mean, since they are expletive in nature, I'm not going to be recording this and putting it up on YouTube, but you can kind of guess, right, some of the other infixes. But so English does this to a very limited extent, unlike Tagalog. But, you know, I just wanted to make the point that English can also do infixation. It's not the case that we have only prefixes and suffixes, but it's just limited in the kind of infixation that we can do in English. All right. So my slideshow is now stuck. Okay. Do you still see the same slide, or has it advanced to the next slide? No? Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's happening. Okay. No? Okay, there we go. So we kind of talked about the mental lexicon, and we talked about the affixation process. But I also said that there are different kinds of lexical categories of words in languages. So very often, you know, we can identify any word and put it into the part of speech that it belongs to. So it could be a verb, right? So you have drink, drinking, drink, drinkable, right? So you can take the verb drink and you can attach different affixation or suffixation to it, and you can create new words, you know, maybe even a different lexical category, right? What is the lexical category of drinkable? Any guesses? Is it a verb? Can you use that as a verb?
That's an adverb, right?
Nope.
Drinkable.
Uh-huh.
Is it an adjective because it's describing the drink?
Yeah, it's an adjective, right? So an adverb is something like lately or slowly. Very often it ends in an ly in English. So the easiest way to identify whether something is an adjective is to kind of put it in between a determiner and a noun. So the drinkable drink that Kelly is drinking right now, right? So I just modified your drink with drinkable, suggesting that that is an adjective and not an adverb, right? Versus Kelly is drinking her drink slowly, that becomes an adverb, because I can just say Kelly is drinking her drink, and then that's a completely grammatical sentence of English, and I don't really need to have that adverb in there. But when I give you that adverb, it's just giving you that extra information to kind of say that, oh, she's drinking it slowly and not, you know, gulping it down or something like that. So that's really the difference between an adverb and an adjective. But you can see how you can take a verb of English or any language and then attach a suffix to it and get a completely different word, right? So to drink is a verb, and then drinkable becomes an adjective, right? So we often distinguish between two types of lexical categories. We say that there are open lexical categories and closed lexical categories. The difference between an open and a closed lexical category is that you can have, new nouns and verbs and adjectives and adverbs every single day, right? I mean, you can create new words, you can brand them, and then they can become, verbs and adjectives and nouns of English, like Google did a couple of years ago, right? That's a completely new made up word, but the brand became so popular that now we just use it as a verb, right? I Googled it. You just take Google and attach ed to it and create Googled. So that's an example of an open lexical category where you can make a new word, create a new word, and put it into one of these categories, like noun or a verb or an adjective or an adverb. And we also have closed lexical categories, and these kind of lexical categories are a little bit more conservative in allowing new members to come into their membership, right, to the club. So pronouns are a classic example of closed lexical categories. I know some of you are doing history of English with me, and we will be talking a lot more about pronouns across the years, and looking at how from Old English to Middle English to Modern English, the one thing that has remained the same is the pronouns, right? We've had changes in verbs, we've had changes in nouns, but the pronouns, they just remain the same, right? Now, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, now you can use they as a pronoun, right? To mean like a specific gender category. I'm not talking about that, right? I'm talking about how you cannot create like a completely new pronoun and have like everybody say that, okay, yeah, this is going to replace he or him or she or something like that, as opposed to nouns and verbs, which have a little bit more flexibility in that sense. Determiners are things like the, a, and, some, none, etc. These are called as determiners, and again, we cannot really create new determiners and add new determiners to this category. Prepositions are things like under, above, on, beneath, etc. And conjunctions are things that join things together. So you have the classic conjunction and. So John and Mary, so that's a conjoined noun phrase, right? So you're taking two nouns and then combining it together to create a bigger noun. So conjunctions are very often things like and or and not and if, then, else, etc. So these are all conjunctions in English. Very often when I teach 151 and 315, I find that there's this, gap between people's understanding of lexical categories, and it's partly to do with the fact that you didn't receive grammar instruction when you were in middle school and high school. So, it's very often the case that I find that if I give you a word and I ask you what lexical category it is, it's not really easy to figure that out, right? So I often tell you to use some test to figure out whether, something is a noun, a verb, or an adjective. A noun comes with a determiner, right? That's a classic test of a noun, right? In 315, I talk about this. If I ask you what was the description that your middle school English teacher gave you for what nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs are, what will be your answer?
Person, place, thing, or idea.
Right, and that's completely wrong, right? That's one thing that I teach a lot of middle school English education students at Wichita State, and I often tell them, like, if you're my student, don't go back to a middle school and teach them that this is a name. What does it even mean, right? It doesn't mean anything. I mean, you can have abstract concepts like love and jealousy, and it's not really a thing. It's not really an idea, right? I mean, it's a concept, it's an abstract concept. Where do you put that, right? What lexical category do you put it? So I want you to think of this linguistically, right? And that's the easiest way to understand what a noun and a verb and an adjective is. A noun always comes with a determiner. Okay, so you have the smart girl, right? Which one is the noun here?
The girl or girls.
Girl. Right. The girl is the noun. This is the noun. And then you have the, which is the determiner, right? So very often you can combine a noun with a determiner. So you can have the girl or the smart girl. When you have smart is an adjective that's modifying girl, right? So any noun of English can appear with an adjective and with a determiner, unless you are a plural noun, right? So you can't say, boys. You can just say boys, right? You don't have to say the boys, right? So you say boys are playing outside today or something like that, right? So there's a little bit of difference grammatically with plural nouns, but when there's no plurality, when there's just a singular noun, you can always combine it with a determiner and an adjective. When you talk about verbs, a verb is something where you can attach the past tense marker. So that's the ed, right? Now I'm only getting irregular past tenses in my head. I was thinking of drink, but drank is an irregular past tense. I walked, right? So that ed is the past tense. But remember that you can also do irregular past tenses. So you can do, just like I said, you can do drink and drank, right? So the past tense marker could be ed, but it could also be an irregular marker, right? And you can also attach things like ing, I am drinking, right? To suggest that, the action is still continuing as we are speaking. And you can also attach auxiliary verbs. So auxiliary verbs are things like I am drinking, right? That am is an auxiliary verb, or when you say I will do it tomorrow, right? That will is again an auxiliary verb. Adjectives are always modifiers, so anything that you can use to modify something. So beautiful girl, smart horse, right? Etc. So these are all adjectives, and like I mentioned earlier, the adverbs are mostly in English, they end in ly. Go. I can see the sharing button on top, and it's not moving and allowing me to create a text button. So I'll just add the adverbs here. So slowly, carefully, right? Adverbs are really versatile in English. There are many different positions in a sentence that you can add adverbs to, and you can actually change the meaning of an adverb when you actually do that. So adverbs are really, they're very versatile, that they can be attached in many different kinds of position to get many different kinds of meaning in English. Any questions on this? Okay. Let's go into the pronouns. So pronouns are things like he, she, they. They always refer back to something, right? I mean, pronouns in English have a lot of curious properties, I want to say. And, I'm sure Kelly can tell us about ASL and pronouns and referring back. With pronouns in ASL, it's a completely different ballgame, right? Compared to English. But pronouns are always really interesting. There's a lot of work, a lot of research work that's happened in pronouns within English and, other languages as well. So that's pronouns. Then you have determiners. That's a, am, the, some, none, all, right? Those are all determiners, right? And prepositions, things like under, above, beneath, to, of, right, etc. Prepositions and conjunctions. It does not allow me to do the last one. Okay, I will add it here. Oh, there it is. So examples of conjunctions are and, or, not, if, then, else, etc. Okay. So like I said, open category and closed category of lexical categories. Okay. Now, I said, the categories are called open because you can actually, create new words and attach new words into that category, and closed categories rarely acquire new members. So let's actually get into, looking at this. You might have seen this before, but your task right now is to look at the screen and tell me how many F, the alphabet Fs, are there in the sentence. You can put that into the chat when you're done reading. Okay. Keep reading and entering your answer into chat. Kelly revised her answer. Okay, so I can see Olivia said 7 if you count the title, but yes, no, not including the title. Yeah, so the answer is actually 6, right? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? But as you can see, some of you counted 3 and then recounted it and said, oh no, it's actually not 3, it's actually 6. The reason is the difference that I just told you about the open category and the closed category. Of, right, all these ofs that you probably didn't count in the first round, they belong to the closed category of lexical categories, right? And very often your brain is actually reading of as of, because that's how you would transcribe it in IPA, right? So when you read it, you read finished files are the result of years of scientific study. You don't actually say of years of scientific study, right? Just because of the way that you combine all those different sounds together. So your brain is kind of like just shut down from that, counting that F, because it's probably parsing as a V and not as an F, right? But the other reason why is also because all the 3 ofs are actually, it's part of the closed category of lexical categories. So your brain really doesn't care, because your brain is just focusing on the content of the word, like all the content words in the sentence, and then all the other words are like, yeah, you're just filling it in. Your cognition is just filling it in, right? So this is what we call a cool grammatical illusion, right? I'm sure you've seen this before. It probably, was going around the social media a couple of years ago. But I really like to show that to distinguish between closed and open. Okay, before we go ahead into different word formation processes, any questions on what we've covered so far? All right, so let's get into the word formation processes. So just like how we looked at affixation in the last class, there are different kinds of word formation processes in English and across languages. Derivation, inflection, compounding, and reduplication. And I'll walk you through each of these individually. The first word formation process is called a derivation, right? And you've heard this term before, maybe in the context of morphology, maybe in the context of languages, but you know, it's a very common word, even if you take a mathematics class, right? But the way that we are defining derivation in morphology is when you make another word from an already existing word. So a classic example of a derivation of English is when you take the verb to play and then you add able to it and you get playable, right? Which I said, you know, drinkable, we looked at earlier, was an adjective. So playable is very similar to that. It's an adjective. So you take a word of English, you attach an affix to it, and then you get another word of English. That is called a derivation, right? So in derivation, very often you change the category of the word, but not always, okay? The derivational process of word formation is very different from inflection, or the inflective word formation process. So here is an example of what we understand by inflection. You can say, I have 4 cats versus I have a cat. So that bold, the S that's bolded right there, that's part of the inflections. That's plural inflection in this case. Has the category of the word changed from cats to cat? Nope, it's still a noun, right? It's just a singular noun versus a plural noun, right? Absolutely no change in meaning. I mean, meaning, of course, the plurality, but you know, no change in the lexical category of the word, unlike play and able, making playable. So how do we understand inflectional and derivational affixes? So I've given you some affixes over here, ER, and I've given this to you in IPA, the D, which is your past tense marker, and your Z, which is, you know, your plural marker in IPA. So some of these affixes, they don't affect the category of the resulting word, right? But some other affixes like able, right, and ION, ER, etc., they sometimes affect the category of the resulting word, right? So this is the difference between an inflectional and a derivational affix. When you talk about inflectional affixes, they don't change the lexical category of the word at all, right? You take a noun, you attach the plural marker to it. You take a word, you attach the past tense marker to it. That's an inflectional process. You can definitely use inflections to create new words in your language, right? That's an option. You can derive new words in your language by using derivational morphology, right? Just like in English. And you know, you don't really necessarily need to change the lexical category. You can always just keep the same lexical category if you want to. But that's the difference between inflectional and derivational affixes. So here is a list of inflectional and derivational affixes in English. So in inflection, you have the ER for adjective. So you have pretty, prettier, right? Smart, smarter. The D, which is your past tense marker. So walk, walked. And dog, dogs, right? The plural marker. So all these are inflectional markers in English. And the derivational markers in English is the ER for verbs, right? As opposed to the ER for adjectives. So play, player, right? Sing, singer. That's what we mean by the derivational ER for verbs in English. The ness, like happy, happiness, right? Happy is a verb, happiness is an adjective. And then you have the able, which we saw drink, drinkable, play, playable, ing, as in to sing, singing, so ing, and the un for adjectives and verbs, so unbreakable, unsolvable, etc. And you see, unsolvable actually has 2 different affixations, right? So you have the un, which is a prefix, and the able, which is the suffix. So you can see how different words in English can actually go through multiple derivational processes, right? You start with, you know, like a word like unlockable, for example. I do this a lot more in 315. It's not super relevant for you, but I think it's still good to know how the derivational process works. So you can start, you know, start with a word like lock, and then you can do lockable, right? And that's step one. And then you can take lockable and attach un, right? Unlockable, which is step two. Can you attach anything more to unlockable? Can you do unlockable-ing, unlockable-er, unlockable-ness, maybe? I don't know. What do you think? Can you attach anything else to unlockable after step two to create an even longer derivational word?
Could you attach S?
Oh yeah, unlockable-ness.
Yeah, I think maybe three of you spoke at the same time. So did you all tell me the ness, you can attach ness? Is that what you said? Okay, I heard ness. Olivia, what did you say?
I said S, like if you have
Oh.
like, oh, I have a bunch of unbreakables, instead of saying like unbreakable things or unlockables, but it sounds a little weird, but I guess it could work.
Sure. I mean, the invisibles, right? You know, you can, there are ways in which I can see where your head is at. So Olivia said, let's put an inflection to unlockable. So this is going to be step three. Now, this word unlockables is completely derived. You cannot derive anything more from this because you put an inflection marker to it. Once you put an inflection marker to a word, that's it. That word cannot participate in any derivational processes again. Okay. And then I heard a ness, right, from step two. So unlockableness. Is that what you guys said? A couple of you? Yeah. But then ness is still a derivational suffix. So, you know, for all purposes, unlockableness can still participate in more derivational processes. I'm not saying it will, but it can participate in derivational processes. There's nothing stopping it from participating because it's not an inflectional marker. Okay. All right. Okay. So reduplication is the third kind of word formation process in English. There are a lot of languages in the world that actually use reduplication as a tool, as a morphological tool, but English does not. It's not an incredibly common word formation process in English, but you know, you can still see it in some cases. So is she just sort of a friend, or is she a friend? Right, where you have an emphasis on friend, on one of the utterances of friend. I don't want a taco salad. I want a salad. Like, you know, in some sense, a taco salad is like a smaller portion, and I want like a bigger kind of salad. She's reading a book, not just a graphic novel, to mean that, you know, she's reading a book with a lot of text in it and not just a book with graphic novels. So English can do this to a certain extent, but again, like I said, there are other languages across the world that actually has reduplication as a word formation process. But one of the most common word formation process in English is compounding, right? I know it's a highly familiar word formation process for a lot of you. You take two different morphemes, combine them together, you create a new word, right? Compounding. So here is an example of some compounds in English. You have blackboard, dollhouse, jumpsuit, steamroll, whitewash, breakdance, nationwide, and blue-green. And if you look at these different compounds, you can see that there's a, you know, the way that you write compounds is, there's a lot of uncertainty with the spelling of compounds. So I just wanted to make a note because I often get asked this question, right? How do you know something is a compound? Because there's just so much of variability with the spelling of English compounds. So you can have, you know, two words written together, like mailman, but you can also have hyphenated. So you can have spoon feed and blue green, but you can also have them as two separate words. I mean, there's really no reason that you should actually put them together. So here are some examples of compounding where you actually write them as two separate words: doghouse, fire engine, oil well, television repair specialization exam, right? Not even two words, but more than two words. So you can see in English, there's just a lot of variability with how you would write a compound, like what the spelling is associated with a compound. So How do you actually figure out if spelling is not a reliable factor for understanding what a compound is? How do we figure out whether, doghouse is a compound word, right? Versus like just two different words put together, like dog and house. So the answer to that is stress, right? Stress in English is very often one of the indications whether things are put together, whether they are compounds, whether they are freestanding morphemes. So when you look at a compound, the main stress is always on the first word. So you have blackbird, doghouse, fire engine, oil well, right? So a blackbird is a kind of bird, a doghouse is a kind of house for a dog, it's not a kind of dog, right? A fire engine is a kind of engine, and an oil well is a kind of oil, right? But the stress is on the first word. When you look at non-compound words like phrases, the main stress is always on the last word. So you have a black car, an old house, a broken engine, an empty well, right? So stress is the main indication of whether two words written separately or written together or hyphenated is actually a compound or a phrase. Okay, because spelling cannot be a reliable predictor of compounding in English. Okay, any questions on compounding or derivation, inflection before we move into the last thing that I want to talk about today before you practice your exercises? Any questions? Okay. So the last thing that I want to talk about is kind of like a typology of languages, because the typology of languages actually ties in to the different word formation processes. So you have differences between an analytic language and a synthetic language in terms of language typology. So a classic example of an analytic language is Mandarin Chinese. Anybody who speaks Mandarin here? Or you're taking classes in Mandarin? Okay. So Mandarin Chinese, I've given you, two sentences from Mandarin Chinese, and there's only literally one difference between the two sentences, and that's the last particle, right? This particle right here. Let me try to open up my annotation tool. Okay. Okay. Oh, it's not showing me the annotation tool, it's showing me something else. But so the last particle there, which is LE in the second sentence, that's the only difference between the two sentences. So the first one is we are playing the piano, 我们弹琴了, right? We played the piano in the past, right? The plural marker or the past tense marker, right? The le. So this is an example of an analytic language because the two sentences are made up of sequences of free morphemes, right? I have no idea why there's an arrow with my name on it. I was trying to get the annotation spotlight, but okay, and now it's refusing to move forward. Arrow, go away. Okay. Let me try to. This arrow is not going away. And the slides are not going forward either. Okay, let me try to. Okay, no, are you still seeing the same slide? The Mandarin Chinese one? Okay. Oh God. Okay, maybe I can open this again. No. Okay. My screen is frozen with that arrow with my name on it, and I have no way of going backward or forward with the slide. So
maybe try stop sharing the screen and start again.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. It's not letting me do that either. It's so frustrating. because I cannot see, so I cannot see my cursor. I can only see this arrow with my name on it, which is why it's not letting me stop share as well. Okay. I'm trying to exit this meeting and come back in, but that it's not letting me do that either. What do you see on my screen right now? Do you see the same Mandarin Chinese slide? Yeah. Okay. 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 Let me see. I'm gonna end meeting and then can you all just log in again? Is that okay? All right. Thank you. That's not letting me end meeting either.